John Darvill on BBC Radio Bristol.
Now, the man and his horse, or one woman and his horse. The horse is something that's been with us for a very, very long time. Indeed, we measure the power of an engine of a car or a vehicle in horsepower. But can a horse teach you about leadership? Well, a Bath entrepreneur, Rosie Tomkins, uses horses to teach leadership and management skills to businesses across the country. She's been doing this for some 7 years, and she has worked with the likes of the England rugby team, the Red Arrows, and the National Health Service. And Rosie's with me here in the studio this morning. Good morning to you.
Good morning, John.
Good morning. Now, are we talking about one of these awful things? In a past life, I have gone to these away days which managers have been dispatched to, and you have to carry an egg from one side of a room to another using a bag of rice and a piece of chewing gum or something.
No, absolutely
Good.
not.
I'm just checking because you know the sort of courses I mean, where you just think, this is a waste of a day. Stop it. So explain what this course is. Explain what you use the horses for, because you've got 3 horses. Haven't
Yes. Well, first of all, I found out that in training organisations, they concentrate very much on the 90% of the 10% of the non-verbal skills, and I realised that possibly I could concentrate on the 90% of the non-verbal skills in communication. So I looked around and started to identify that there was an area that was lacking, in my opinion. We know about IQ, we know about EQ, emotional intelligence. Some of us know about spiritual intelligence. But for me, there was a very different, big gap in the market in terms of natural intelligence, that je ne sais quoi, where you know what to do without thinking. And so
what some people might call instinct.
And so I wondered how we could demonstrate that in a training organisation. And I thought that possibly we could use animals, and especially horses.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because animals, horses, they rely more on instinct than on intellect. And we have an intellectual brain and we have an instinctive brain, and our instinctive brain is often overridden by our intellectual brain.
Absolutely. But the fundamental difference is when you're working with a team is that once you're out there with the horses, you have to switch off the intellectual and work with something else, because obviously horses can't speak to us. So we have to show up in a different way. And they're asking 3 questions, really, a horse. It's basically, am I safe? Can I trust you? And who's leading right now? And those are the same questions that we ask in business all the time. And we ask individuals, am I safe? Can I trust you? And who's leading right now?
It's interesting that the horse, you're using horses here, because I have a bit of horse knowledge insofar as my mum's got horses and I grew up with horses.
Okay.
And you can walk past a carrier bag in a hedge one day, horse doesn't bat an eyelid. The next day you walk past the same carrier bag, the conditions are exactly the same, and the horse will freak out because it's just seen a carrier bag. They're not that predictable as an animal, are they? The horse.
Absolutely not. And as you know, life and business is not predictable.
No, absolutely
either.
not. No.
So what I tend to say is that, you're going to, in life and business, you're going to come across situations that you're not expecting. So why not practice that in a kind of leadership simulator, working with horses, so that you can explore how it is when you're outside your comfort zone?
I want to talk more about this later, but let's just talk a bit about you, because you've had a number of different businesses. This one's been going, you told me just before we started talking live on BBC Radio Bristol, it's been going some 7 years.
Yeah.
You are an entrepreneur. What does that mean to you?
I think it's really someone who loves ideas. I am fascinated by ideas, always have been. But fundamentally, I like to ground them. So if you get a good idea, I like to make it happen. Sometimes people think it's very strange. I have extraordinary ideas. Some are good, some are bad. But when they happen, I put all my energy behind it and focus on it. And I've been very fortunate in, my first company was sold to a PLC. So off my kitchen table, I was able to start a business and then see it, flourish and move into a very big organisation where I learnt a lot.
So you started a kitchen table and you end up working at a PLC. I'd imagine that's a big thing, isn't it? I mean, you find yourself in I don't know whether you are in a sort of a glass-fronted tall building and thinking to yourself, this isn't quite what I imagined, or was it what you imagined? I don't know. Do you have an imagination? Not you personally, but can you have that sort of imagination which takes you from kitchen table to huge polished boardroom?
No, I think the answer is no. It was a shock to them, and it was a shock to me. There's suddenly a new language appeared: turf wars, silos,
Management
politics.
speak.
Yes,
or what I call waffle.
Yeah.
Because a lot of this stuff is waffle and nonsense, isn't it? It's sort of a language of its own that shall we say, has been turned into a whole dialogue that a lot of people talk that is meaningless.
Yes, and it excludes people very quickly because you may not have been in that environment, and it's a way of excluding people by using different kind of frame of reference. And while I was in that environment, we had things like appraisals, and I was very aware that a lot of it was about how you could improve. And I felt very strongly that if I ever run a training company, I would be looking at strengths and how to celebrate people's innate qualities.
It's when you say that, I can imagine there's a lot of people who are listening to you right now, Rosie, who have had appraisals, who have gone through that whole process, and it's just sort of here we go again.
Yeah.
They look at last year's appraisal to talk about things that they did last year. Nothing's really happened or changed in a year, and they're going to go through the motions again. Yeah. There is a sort of circular.
Yes.
Corporate world, isn't there?
Yes, and it's extremely demotivating. And for me, that was the main thing. Why would I, if they bought me for my creativity and my kind of inspirational style, why then would I need to go on kind of time management courses and, accountancy? Because obviously that's not my strength. So, working with the horses is about, as I say, learning to respect people and their strengths and using those strengths for the good of the whole.
Okay, I'll tell you what, let's take a pause for Rita Ora. We'll talk more about how that actually happens in the real world, and some of the people that you've worked with as well, including the England rugby team, the Red Arrows. Quite how you'd get pilots to work with a horse, I don't know, but that'll be interesting of its own. Rosie Tomkins, Bath entrepreneur. More from her after Rita Ora. Whatever that is. 08000 855 949. Call now, and from 11:45, the last three records, today's 3 to 12, could include your request. Still with me, Rosie Tomkins from Bath, from Bradford-on-Avon in Bath, who teaches management skills using horses. Which doesn't sound as potty as it does when I say that out loud. How do you explain your business?
So it is difficult to articulate. It's an intangible.
Because I said that out loud, and you think, you could just imagine what I would call on this programme a load of lanyard-wearing waffle-mongers sitting around looking at a horse going, I don't know how this works.
Okay.
How do you explain it?
So for me, I explain it by saying, there is a formula to leadership and to business, really. And we know that you need IQ, we know that you need EQ, we know that you need SQ to be the best that you can be.
IQ is intelligence.
Yeah.
EQ is
emotional intelligence,
and SQ
is spiritual intelligence.
Okay.
And for me, it's a kind of three-legged stool, and I believe that training in any organisation or for anybody should be a four-legged chair, and we're missing a pillar or a leg of the chair, and that for me is NQ. That's that natural intelligence. Then when the chips are down and we have to think on our feet, we have to bring together all the multiple intelligences into making a decision in a very short space of time. So to give you an example of that, there are many examples, both in nature and with humans, but there was a Hudson River landing, the very famous pilot.
Yes, indeed, yes,
yeah.
which was Sully.
Yeah, that's it.
It was turned into a movie, wasn't it, starring Tom Hanks?
Yeah.
But a true life story.
Absolutely. And if he had listened to his what he was being told to do, which was the thinking part, they were asking him to turn the aircraft back and land at New York, I think. And in his judgment, he used his natural intelligence to land the aircraft, saving 150 lives on the Hudson River. That was an instinctive decision or a natural intelligence decision. His NQ was very powerful and strong.
It's interesting. I keep saying it's interesting today. I do apologise. But this is interesting. It's interesting that we don't trust our natural intelligence.
Yes.
What I said earlier, instinct.
Yeah.
And indeed, we often have an instinct about something, and we try and override that by thinking it through.
Yes, absolutely.
Rather than perhaps questioning the instinct and seeing where it takes us.
Yeah. And we've been trained to do that. We are told to override it. We learn to override it. And I'm not saying that.
Where does that come from?
It's a safety valve, isn't it? I mean, if we don't just went with instinct alone, we would never probably board an aircraft. The thought of going up in a metal box is probably not something our brains would have us do. But when you combine all of these, especially with that instinctual gut instinct, it makes the decision making much more powerful. And you become a much more rounded person. So this is not just for business, it's for individuals as well. How can I lead my life the best way for me? Not just, and I say for teams and individuals and organizations, it's kind of turning it on its head, as you say, and believing in self.
So what makes a good manager, a good leader? Manager's different, isn't it? I have one of my little theories. There are leaders in this world and there are managers in this world. And if one looks at our prime ministers over the last, 30 years, there are leaders and there are managers within that cohort of the political class. That you can be one, you can be both, but there is a difference between being someone who can manage people and someone who can lead people. And
it's changed. I've got some statistics from Gallup here. A good leader in the past was someone who showed courage, passion, was very inspirational and had a purpose. And the new figures from the Gallup poll says that followers want leaders who are stable, who they can trust, show compassion and give hope. So it's a very big difference now about what we want from our leaders. And what's fascinating for me is that animals show that all the time. So, when you're working with animals, they have to have, you have to trust you. And you have to trust them, else they won't work with you. They have to have stability. They have to have food and shelter every day. And they have this incredible discipline to go out there and seek it.
But that's the trade, isn't it? That's the trade-off, isn't it? If you're going to get on a horse's back, the horse has to know that you're not going to hurt it. And the horse has to also understand that it's going to get fed or it has access to food and water. And you're part of that relationship. And if you're not doing that, then the horse, like any animal, like a dog or a cat, will probably think, well, a cat will probably clear off somewhere else and work out where it can get it from. But a dog is going to be not your friend if you're not part of that relationship.
Yeah, what we're looking at here really is not domesticated animals because obviously they are captured. They're enclosed by us. In the wild, a herd of horses in the wild, they have roles within the herd. And this is what we look at with the business side, is the herd dynamics, because it's exactly as any team anywhere. Who's the leader right now? Is it rotational? Who is doing what? What's the roles with the herd? So with horses, a lot of people think that the alpha male is always the leader. And the reality in a herd of horses in the wild and the prairie, the alpha male is at the back of the herd and the alpha female is the one that is the leader of direction at the front. And within the herd, there are many other roles, and they are all working together in a very collaborative way for the good of the whole.
So there are alpha females as well as alpha males. This is the often thing that's thrown out, Rosie, isn't it? Is that there's an alpha male and the alpha lion or the alpha horse or whatever is always in charge, which clearly isn't the case.
No, absolutely not. I mean, they in all sorts of examples I could give you, there is very much a rotational leadership going on. If you take sandhill cranes, for example, they fly long distances and they use a formation where they're using the whole team to survive through turbulence, and it rotates so that they can rest, and they are all honking their support as the new leader takes the position at the front. So they're using all their strengths for the good of the whole.
So when you do this with horses, whether it's the England rugby team or a management company or whatever, Red Arrows you work with in the NHS, you're making people aware of what they've already got. That this is something that's within us already.
Absolutely.
But it's about awareness of what's within us rather than going, here's a whole new load of skills, learn this lot. This is part of who we are, but we've suppressed it or we've forgotten it.
Yes. This is not new. This, as you say, is within all of us. And I believe that we've got 400,000 years of leadership DNA within our bodies, and we just need to access it. And because of all sorts of reasons, we have stopped accessing it. And as I say, with NQ, this is
nature intelligence,
natural intelligence. We can bring that to the fore.
Can anybody be a leader?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We all are leaders. We wouldn't be on the planet today if we weren't leadership. We didn't have that DNA within us. And it needs to be trained. It needs to be learnt. You can't just expect people to know it immediately. So, when people are put in positions of leadership, they need a helping hand. And as I say, the horses are almost like a leadership simulator. And you can practice what goes on in the boardroom out in the paddock.
Well, it's been fascinating talking to you. I've learned loads from you. Rosie Tomkins, entrepreneur. Where can we find out more about what you do?
Okay, so
a website or
yes,
a
please.
thing? I've
yes.
got it written down here.
The website is called N with a capital N hyphen instinctive.com. My book is due out shortly, which is called The Nature Factor, and I'm taking a film script to Cannes in May, which is going to be a film about this work.
Okay, N hyphen
instinctive.com.
N-instinctive.com. Rosie, thank you very much for joining me this morning. Rosie Tomkins.
My pleasure.
Many thanks.